Hey everybody, what's up? Yeah, I'm here to give you my review or my thoughts on Going to Seed. Now, I know what you're going to probably think at first. Why haven't I done a review so far this year? Well, mostly, long story short, what I do is I DVR each of the new episodes of Friendship is Magic for this final season. And then what I do, depending on the opportunity that gets presented in my favor, is I go and I record the DVR onto my DVD recorder and onto DVD. Now, what I've been doing throughout most of the season and even somewhat of last season is I'll just record the whole DVR recording, which also includes the commercials. So I'll do that, but when I get down to the nitty-gritty, basically down to, like, let's say the 90-minute mark or so, that's when I'll start recording or DVD recording the DVR recording, but also being there to make sure I don't get the commercials, so that way I can save time. Which means I will watch the episode. I will go back and forth, catch a glimpse, and go back and do what I'm doing, and then as soon as the commercial comes on, I'll pause it, fast forward the commercial, and then when I get to the certain point where it's going to come back on, I press play. And then I unpause the DVD recorder. So that's what I do. And at times it allows me to actually catch and watch the episode. And all the other times that I've given my thoughts on episodes, it's mostly through what people have talked about in their videos, in their memoirs, if you will, or their written reviews and thoughts. So I go based off that, and I also watch some clips here and there so I can get a good understanding. But I did watch the episodes, and when I do watch them, I will review them. And I did watch Going to Seed because I had to, like I said, cut out the commercials. And what I saw, I will admit, was very good. It's one of those episodes, one of those stories that we've kind of seen done before, but it was done in a way that really surprised a lot of people, because the message basically at the end is you're never too old to not only have fun, but you're never too old at times to believe in certain things. Like, if something feels unexplainable, then maybe there's a reason to it. And that you shouldn't be, and that you're never old enough to give up on that belief. This is why, believe it or not, a lot of adults and even teens still believe in Santa Claus. Because not only does it make them feel young again, but they also keep that illusion, that belief alive for the next generation. And that's kind of what you see here. But at the same time, you have a character, one of the main six, learning a valuable lesson in that same category. You see, the episode Going to Seed is an Apple family-centered episode, but mostly it's an Applejack, Apple Bloom sister-centric episode. And what I like about this is Apple Bloom is being acknowledged to be acknowledged as a character that, even though she's still small, she's old enough now, basically like a preteen, if you will, to understand that certain myth and legends don't really exist, and they're just made up to tell tall tales. But if there's one thing I think Applejack here should know better than any pony, along with the rest of her friends, is just because you think something's a myth doesn't mean it ain't real. And that's kind of the lesson she gets retaught here in this episode. The fact that just because you don't think something could be real doesn't mean it may not be. So, what is the episode about? Well, there's this certain harvest. I think it's a cider harvest. I can't think of the name. I was going back and forth checking on my laundry while I was recording it. And it comes every 100 years. So the Apple family has to do what they can to harvest every apple they have every vegetable they might have for this occasion. So they need all the help they can get, and Granny Smith enlists the help of Goldie Delicious. And Goldie Delicious comes along with her cats, and she kind of starts instigating this whole Great Seedling myth, and we find out that Apple Bloom used to believe in the seedling herself before she gave that up, I would assume to focus more on her crusader duties. But then, when Goldie Delicious brings it up again, Apple Bloom starts to get intrigued by it and figures, hey, if we can capture this great seedling, our harvest will be done in no time flat. It'll give us a bountiful harvest. Now, Applejack, of course, is not too thrilled at Goldie Delicious, and even now Granny Smith, chiming in on it, kind of instigating this whole Great Seedling deal. And we find out that the reason Applejack doesn't like that is due to the fact that like Apple Bloom, she once believed in the Great Seedling herself. And what happened to kind of cause Applejack's belief to be terminated or shelved for the time being was she accidentally fell into one of her own traps. And she remained there for almost an entire day. And that's what kind of convinced her that the Great Seedling was not real. That there was no such thing. But what happens is there's a couple of incidences over the next couple of days to where that belief starts to come back. Now, Applejack does try to compromise with her sister and tries to compromise and understand where her sister's coming from. And what happens is one day Apple Bloom has has the rest of the family come outside because she's discovered something. And what she's discovered is a whole crop of apples lined up in a pattern, kind of like those UFO like crop circles or whatever. But she sees an entire track, miles worth of apples just spewed around in some kind of crop circle like pattern. And Applejack I should say, at first is not believing this. And she even accuses Goldie Delicious, Big Mac, and Granny Smith for probably going out there and putting that little pattern together. Now, Granny Smith and Goldie do take exception to this because Applejack should know them better than that. So anyway, long story short, Applejack does finally confront her sister and tries to understand where her sister's coming from, and even help her sister to understand that sometimes things like this Great Seedling may not be everything it's cracked up to be, and that the best way to get this harvest or get these apples ready for the harvest is by hard work. But Apple Bloom kind of counter-argues or kind of counter-talks her sister by counter-questions her sister, or counter-answers, whatever you want to call it, her sister by saying, well, how do you explain those crops being in that pattern? There has to be a reason for it. So basically Applejack comes up with a compromise, and that compromise is, look, Apple Bloom, you help us out with the harvest during the day, and I'll help you set those traps at night. And that's what they do. And believe it or not, Applejack, in a sense, starts to have a little fun with it. And what happens is the next day, once again, there's a whole crop of apples set up in a pattern, just like the day before. Apple Bloom goes to check the traps, I should say, notices none of them were activated. None of them were triggered. And by noticing this for the second day in a row, this crop and track of apples being in this pattern, Applejack starts to believe it. She even acknowledges that, hey, maybe this guy is real, or this being is real. And she starts to get that belief that she once had as a filly, coming back to her. Got magical belief. So, what happens, long story short again, and I know I say that a lot, her and Apple Bloom decide to focus more on setting traps than on the harvest. In fact, even when Goldie and Granny say, okay, this is cool and everything, but we need to get to work here, Applejack's like, what are you talking about? Me and Apple Bloom got to set traps here. So she kind of quickly compromises, comes up with a solution that, look, we could do this. Big Mac can cover for us. And Big Mac reluctantly is like, okay. So yeah, you see Big Mac. So after that, you see not only the sisters setting up traps, but you also see Big Mac bucking a lot of the trees. And then he gets to a certain tree that when he hits it with his leg, nothing comes down. And he even takes out the map, or the map to all the trees and everywhere they had to harvest, and notices, and he looks up and notices every tree has been bucked, except for maybe one. So Applejack and Apple Bloom come around to see how he's doing, because they're setting up traps, and he shows Applejack the map, and Applejack's like, that's impossible. How can every tree already be bucked? And it's because, and by noticing this, Apple Bloom and even Applejack start to believe that, hey, this great, maybe it was the Great Seedling. So Applejack's belief is becoming more and more legitimate again, or legitimized again. So what happens, long story short, they decide to camp out in a treehouse. And we get a special moment, a little bonding moment there, where Apple Bloom kind of acknowledges that it's just that even if nothing comes of it, she's just happy her and her sister are doing something together. And Applejack concurs with that. She agrees that she's happy they're doing it too. She even acknowledges that back when they were kids, her and Big Mac, that their parents would tell them stories about the seedlings, about the Great Seedling. So anyway, to get to the ending here, both fall asleep. Apple Bloom, of course, falls asleep while Applejack's talking to her. And Applejack falls asleep later on herself. A little drool coming out of her mouth. Which is kind of cool. Oh, kind of neat. But anyway, Apple Bloom wakes up because she hears something. She hears one of the traps going off near the trees. Sees one of the trees shaking. She wakes up her sister. Applejack sees this, and Applejack's like, well, let's go check it out. So they go in to check it out, and they see what looks like to be the Great Seedling. And while they're doing this, Apple Bloom starts to get a little tensed. Like, yeah, she's been wanting this to happen, but she's kind of worried of how the seedling will react to them. So anyway, to get to the closing here, basically what happens is they encounter what they believe to be the seedling, because it comes up right from behind them, and they start running away from it, because again, they're not too sure how it's going to react. And basically, as they get to the barn, after Apple Bloom gets caught up in one of the traps, after they get to the barn, they can't get in, and just when it looks like, it's going to be the end for them, if you will, because they're holding on to each other, that's when the seedling appears and reveals that it's actually been Big Mac harvesting in his sleep. Harvest walking, if you will. And even when they see this, they acknowledge that, wait a minute, Big Mac? And that's when Applejack puts two and two together, like, he's been harvesting in his sleep the whole time. And Apple Bloom's the one that wakes him wakes him out of his sleep when she yells, Big Mac's the Great Seedling? you know. So that wakes Big Mac enough to where he falls into one of the traps. The girls and even him get a little bit of a laugh and chuckle out of it when they ask if he's alright. Right, and everything. And after that, basically we transition to the next day. They have all the apples they need, all the apples and everything they need for the harvest, because, you know, Big Mac overworking himself into harvest walking in his sleep. And that was just my stomach, sorry about that. But like I said, harvest walking in his sleep. And the episode ends with Goldie Delicious deciding to leave because they don't need her help anymore. And as she's leaving, she notices a trail, and if not a crop pattern, of carrots. Just, spewed about. And Applejack's like, wait a minute. Big Mac didn't do this. Yes. And even Big Mac says, nope. Goes, nope. Or something like that. And basically, both sisters look at each other and they're like, well, you know what this means? You damn right, Don Tootin'. And then that image we saw in the trailer of them running towards the screen is basically them saying, Great Seedling, here we come. And watch out, Great Seedling, here we come. And that's how the episode ends. But the message that gets across here, and even Applejack acknowledges it to Apple Bloom, that you're never too old to be a filly, and mostly you're never too old to have fun. In other words, it's a message to adults that, hey, you're never too old to kind of act childish if you want to, be a kid, at heart, and you're never too old to be a filly or to have fun and believe in certain things, even if the belief is to help, even if that belief is to support the belief of the new generation. So overall, I thought the episode was good. It was innocent. It had some great moments. I love the flashback. It was a brief flashback, but it's what a lot of fans have been hoping for, to see something that had Bright Mac and Pear Butter, or Buttercup, back on the series. It's a flashback when they're telling the story about Applejack once believing, and I guess now believing again. We see Bright Mac with Big Mac, and we see a very small baby-eyed Apple Bloom being carried by Buttercup. So at least we know the Apple family was together. We know that. And a lot of people, and I heard one person on Facebook say, well, the episode where the apple lies, which is another flashback episode, was before Apple Bloom, right? Because we didn't see her. Here's the thing. Where the Apple Lies, I think, took place the season before The Perfect Pair. And to me, Apple Bloom was there, but she was probably asleep in a crib. Remember, she was probably a kid. Maybe she was at preschool. We don't know. Because this is when Applejack and Big Mac were kind of in their teens. So the flashback we get here in Going to Seed takes place before that. That's how I see it. But overall, the episode was good. I thought it was great. Now, have there been some duds when it comes to the episodes recently? That's all a matter of opinion. But I thought the episode was good. I thought it was innocent. I thought it was great. It had some good moments. If you're an animation enthusiast, it had some great new facial expressions for Applejack and Apple Bloom. So, this is really good. The animators brought the A-game with that. And I can't say any more. So, I can't say any more than what I've already said, or what people like Dr. Wolf, or I'm sure Map's going to say, or Silver Quill, or whoever. But, yeah, I thought Going to Seed was good. I would recommend watching it, because it does have a good message in it in the end. So, that's all I'm going to say, guys. Let me know what you all think down below. Comment if you like, and I will talk to you all later.